everyone, and welcome to this new conversation of excellence. I have a very special guest today, Robin Booth. Robin Booth is a dear friend of mine. He's a serial entrepreneur. He is the Investor of the Year 2018 in South Africa. He is the Mega Entrepreneur of the Year 2017. But he is just much, much more than that. I am so delighted to discover more about him with you in the next minutes. Robin, welcome.
Thanks, Stella. Great to be online and obviously to share some real great insights, wisdom, interesting information, hopefully some fun examples as well of excellence, leadership, and the kind of conversations that we want to really be having with ourselves, with our clients, with our families, with our colleagues, with our friends. This is what can really uplift ourselves to a whole new level. So I'm really excited to be able to share this with you.
Oh, I'm really excited too, Robin. And first of all, before we dig into the next minutes, I wanted to ask, are there some things I forgot to mention about you as an introduction before we go into more details?
Well, you did mention, about a serial entrepreneur, but probably I could only claim that as a title once I consciously became aware that this was what I was doing. Before that, I have a background in education, was the male South African preschool teacher to qualify, and I actually was a preschool teacher teaching children between 3.5 years to 5.5 years, had my own class. I started my own school, primary school as well, was a landscaper, built my own house. I have online courses around the world, over 20,000 students enrolled in my courses. As you mentioned, I invest in property, both in South Africa, in the US. So really have an interesting insight into a whole different places. Lived in many different countries, South America, Europe, Italy. So, this is going to be a great conversation to really look at, well, what makes excellence, what makes good leaders, what makes people that really love to live the lives that they want to create. And I think that's one of my real passions. So I'm sure that's going to come out.
I'm really happy that you brought up, I would just stay here for days saying everything that you are, Robin, but you really touched like a great 360 views so far. And it leads me to my first question. Now, I never told you about this, but one of the best quotes I found on your website was related to all the different careers that you had in your life. And it is, I quote, "We are beyond the era of choosing a single career for life." Why was it important for you to bring up that quote on your website?
So if we tap into my experience of being a conscious adult and saying, well, what does it mean to be human, and what does it mean to live these meaningful lives that are important to us and to what we're striving for? And one of the fundamentals is an education system that kind of tells us that there is one correct path. There's an assumption that we come out of school and need to learn to choose a career, and we have to choose a career that we're literally going to be in until we eventually retire, if people still do that. And of course, then somehow we begin to live our lives at retirement age. And I think just that belief, that if we maintain that belief or believe it true for ourselves, that we have one path, then we're going to remain in something that we're currently involved in, which may not really be fulfilling for us, or we're going to just limit our vision and decrease the opportunities that are there. So I think first and foremost, we aren't in that era anymore. We're in this era where people are rotating through jobs every 2 years. They're not satisfied with just one size fits all. So really, I think that the moment we start to see that we are more than just the sum of one choice of a career, then new opportunities open up. And as you know, I'm a great fan of creating opportunities and of course, moving into the world of possibility, not just opportunity. An opportunity is what we see that's in front of us. Therefore, we just have a choice. But a possibility opens up a creation, something that exists beyond opportunity. And the moment we look into what's possible, then we're not even limited by just what is in front of us, but other opportunities that we begin to create that were not there in the first place. And I think that's the first fundamental step, right? One, we're beyond that era, that there's just one possibility for us, or one option. And I think that's really does underline that, that kind of framework of what I believe life is about is that, we're continuously in a space of reassessing, reevaluating, rediscovering who we are, who we want to be, and that is flexible. And when that happens, really great things start to emerge.
Well, you really seem to be convinced of what you're saying today. And I guess there has been different steps for you to arrive to that, conviction of yours. And my question now is to know, knowing what you said, how does it impact today the choices that you make for yourself?
So you definitely go through different stages in getting to the point, like I've just shared, of where that feels really true for you.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first one is realizing that sometimes the limits that we set on ourselves are actually greater than the limits that anyone else sets on ourselves. So the moment you begin to acknowledge that maybe that limit is higher or more expansive than we were used to, that's a whole different standpoint. But when you begin to realize that the possibility exists that you can create more possibilities, it becomes actually quite daunting, because suddenly there's a multitude of options opening up for you.
Mm-hmm.
And in that space, that's really something quite exciting, exhilarating, scary, because it's like, wow, that means that every day could actually be a totally different day than before. There's nothing holding me back. Those are just beliefs that I have at that moment. And the moment we step into that, then actually every moment or every day could be a total rediscovering or recreating of yourself. And I think that's a bold space to be in. It's because it impacts everything. And I think that's really what it's down to. It's just that realization that that is possible. Now it's just for you to choose, what do you want to do with that?
Wow, marvelous. I was so into your answer, actually. And I was wondering, with the people you work with, so you work today as a leader of excellence with different types of people. And I guess you're helping them to enter that space that you've just so marvelously described. What is the greatest myth that you have observed that people have that just holds them back from getting into that space?
The myth is that there is one right answer. And if someone has to keep searching until they're going to find what it is. And I think once we believe that, then it feels like we're always trying to compare ourselves to an ultimate, to the best, as opposed to realizing that actually that could be a recreation in many ways. And you are going to be the judge of what is important. And you are going to be the judge to decide what the meaning is. And I think that's the thing that's holding most people back, is they're going to be comparing themselves or the choices they're making against this belief that they have, which is there is a correct pathway or a correct route that they like to follow. And I think when you take down those judgments and comparisons, then every day becomes an opening of exciting opportunities. And I think then that weight that people feel that, they're not doing it right, they're not good enough, they don't have the right insight or the right skills, starts falling away. And then it's about a discovery and about curiosity. Stella, that's what I loved most about being a preschool teacher, is working with 4-year-old, 4.5-year-olds who as yet don't have these fixed beliefs about how the world is or should be. And the moment you just shift their viewpoint on a certain topic or open up the possibility for them, you see that wonder in their eyes, their awe, as they just like open up and say, oh, okay, if that's the truth, then that's the truth, and let me follow that. And that's what I actually enjoyed most about working with young children, is just that total openness to what and the excitement that myself as a facilitator, right? Because conversations of excellence or leadership actually begins right down at that level. It's not only for the CEO and for the founder and the directors. It's right at the level of all the different people in a business. And as young children, we start to have those conversations of excellence with ourselves. In other words, in our own brains, we're having that conversation with ourselves. And if we are understanding that conversation and empower that conversation, which is myself as a facilitator of young children, when I was younger, that's just an exciting space, because you can very quickly change a whole child's world perception and set themselves up for an incredibly empowering life.
Oh, I love the way you put that. You know, when you were describing the the wonders around the fact that you worked with children before, I was like, adults also need that space of wonder, you know? And it brings me to my next question, which is, what is maybe the one of maybe the greatest tool that you used while being a school teacher that you use today with adults, with these leaders that you're helping today? What are the tools, some of the tools that you take from working with children and that you use today with working with adults that really ignite that wonder, perhaps, still?
I would think that there were two main skills, which I call them skills as such, techniques, if you want to call them, really involve communication. Because communication is the interplay between the space between two people or between the people that are in that group who are having the conversation. And communication is a channel or a tool through which we can communicate something that we're experiencing such that we want the other person to understand and hopefully integrate and experience similar to what we're experiencing. So communication is a tool. So the we realize that communication can be upskilled, we realize that we can improve the connectedness or the well-being of our relationships, whether it's in the workspace or in the family relationships, to a whole new level. And out of that, for me, there were two skills which are incredibly important. And the process of communication is, if we want to improve our communication, we need to improve our consciousness of what is happening and what we're saying between two people, which means we need to be more aware of what's going on inside of us, right? So those are all processes that we focus on. But the two skills are actually the skills of acknowledgement or the skills of empowerment. In other words, helping someone to create an authentic, fulfilling self-esteem. In other words, creating the sense of possible within themselves. And how does myself as a leader or as a school teacher convey that to a child so that, or a staff member, so that they can see that potential for themselves? It's not me giving fake praise. It's not me giving something that's inauthentic, good job, well done, you saved us a lot of money, or, you completed that project on time, but conveying to them that they have the possibility as well. And that for me was one of the most powerful tools that I first learned, especially as a young teacher working with young children. And probably the most powerful out of everything, Stella, is problem solving. In other words, the absolute skill in being able to meet with a group of people who appear to be in conflict and to unlock that conflict in such a way that everyone feels that this is something special and we're moving closer to something that's important for us. And I often say that the master of all skills is conflict resolution or problem solving skills. And that is, how do we really come to understand another person's point of view, come to work with it, share our own point of view in non-threatening or non-undermining ways, and then creatively come together and actually find a solution. And a solution comes as a creation of that conversation, not as a desired outcome. So I want to actually repeat that because it is so important. Often people go into conflict resolution for the purpose of finding a solution. I find that actually the real power of problem solving is going in to hear what the other person has to say, to understand it from their perspective, and to be in that space. As such, a natural solution emerges, but it's not the goal of the conversation. And the moment we switch that around, then actually we find that there are many solutions for us, as opposed to, oh, I found a solution and suddenly we're all heading off on that. So there are two skills which for me are absolutely important. And like you've probably noticed, I've got so many other skills for how to get people to cooperate, how to get the best out of them, how to actually bring their leadership personalities out and their skills out, how to get them, how to give them compliments that really make them feel empowered and will produce back more into the company. So all of those, which are currently, I guess, termed as soft skills, I actually think are the most important skills.
Wow, it's very subtle what you talked about. And this is why I really qualify you as a leader of excellence, because you have that capacity to go beyond the doing. It's really beyond the hard skills. And you talked about the soft skills. And it brings me up to I think you're the right person to ask that question to. I work with organizations and teams, and today one of their challenge often is when they have to face unexpected change or even planned change. You know, as human beings, I guess you've already noticed that we don't love to change, but we have to somehow deal with it, especially in the world we are today in. What is, according to you, one of the main skills, or maybe one of the main thought process that leaders within organization need to go through to cope with the changes that they have to undergo with their teams?
So change for me, well, if I'm thinking of what I'm wanting as the underpinning part of the conversation is that although there may be change, what I'm wanting to keep in place is the sense of connectedness and the sense of belonging. So in companies, although there's change, I'm wanting my staff members to feel that they still belong in this company, that this company still has their best interest at heart, even though there are changes that are happening. Because the moment that's still in place, my employees are going to remain committed to finding a solution. They're going to remain committed to seeing how to make this work. Change is very difficult to bring about if people have given up. If they've given up that there is a future possibility, that there is something positive that can come out of change. And in problem solving, which is another form of change, we're setting a conversation about how do we bring about this change in such a way that it minimizes the impact, but still gives us at the core level what we're all wanting. And if our employees feel that we as the leaders are committed to that, committed not just in words, but in all of our actions and our real intentions, they will stay on board and present to helping us find that solution. You know, as a school principal many years back, we had many really difficult situations because we were a private school, weren't government funded, and we had to make it work. And there were many months where cash flow was difficult. We had challenging situations in South Africa to resolve. And each part of that, those kind of points, the most empowering process was having conversations with the staff members and then with the parents, where it was clear that this is what we wanted as the outcome. And that outcome was that we feel that we are creating something that's really special for us, and that no one feels that we're ignoring or undermining their point of view. We may not agree on it, but we're not undermining it. And the moment you go into that kind of space, then people still feel connected. They still feel that this is a place they want to be in, even if they're not sure where it's going. But that's the most important part. You know, they often say, you know, get the right people on the bus and then decide where you want to go, as opposed to choose where you want to go and then try and find people to join. So getting the right people, which in this case for me is getting the right conversation frameworks. Once those are in place, then actually the change is an exciting process.
Wow, you're making change exciting for everyone, Robin. Wow, great. I'm hesitating between two questions, to be honest, because what you're sharing is so insightful and so important. But I think I will go to that other part. I'm going to talk about adventure. So I know, knowing you, that you have, that adventure seems to occupy a very important place in your life. And my question is to know, what do you find in these adventures of yours that maybe people are missing out in their own lives? What is so attractive in that part of your life, adventure? Can you tell us more about that? Maybe it's a secret, but can you tell us more? Because maybe some people don't know.
So this is now this is more of a personal conversation, because
Yes.
I don't think we can generalize adventure as something everyone wants to do, or adventure looks the same for every person. So I think I would want to just preface this by saying this is my experience of adventure, why it's important for me. And I think the adventure for me falls under three real categories. The first one is, throughout my life, there are books, stories, movies where we hear about people doing these amazing things. They've pushed themselves beyond their limits. They've set a goal and worked hard to achieve the goal, whether it's going to the South Pole in a boat, whether it's climbing Everest, whether it's going through the jungle, whether it's just climbing their local mountain in their, in their country. But it's people who are saying, I'm wanting to create something or do something in my life that is bigger than my everyday process. And for me, that was a really important part, because adventure is, in my world, defined as doing something that is not ordinary in my life. It is something that is bigger than I probably would do if it was just there every day. And in that space, adventure actually taps into something which is exciting for me. It pushes me often, because it's physical adventure that I most thrive on. So whether it's climbing a high mountain or sailing in a tall ship to the Antarctica, which I've done, whether it's crossing deserts, or whether it's kite surfing long distances. For me, it's around an experience, because every time I'm in an adventure, I feel incredibly alive, because I am aware of what's going on, and I'm doing something with other people that really creates a sense of team and fulfillment. So for some people, they like adventure's not for them. And for some people, adventure is way more extreme than I'm wanting the adventure to be, right? There's some people that in my world are crazy in what they do for adventure. I don't need to do that either. But for me, you're right. It's a really important part. And I think it underpins, one of my favorite quotes, which is really about creating the life that I love to live. And I think that's what I hold adventure up is what I'm doing today going to move me forward into creating the life that I love to live. And in my world, that's adventure. I mean, that after this call, I've got a 3-hour kite surf session lined up here by my house in Cape Town. So that for me is like, today I'm going to have a real great adventure. So it's just those kinds of things. And the more I can bring them into my everyday life, the more I feel that I'm creating the life that I love to live.
Wow. I can see myself also in the adventure that you're going to do in a few hours time. But you talk a lot about creating your own life. And I know that today many people don't always stand in the position of creating their own lives. And for XYZ reasons, it's not always obvious. But what would you say is the first step to go towards that creation? What would be your advice for these people who don't?
So I'm glad you actually brought that up, Stella, because I stand in that, when I say, for me, creating the life that I love to live, it comes from a privilege. From a privilege that I have choice, that it's not just about getting food on the table for the family, or getting roof over their heads, or just surviving in an environment that's really not conducive to my well-being. So yes, you highlighted that correctly, that it is from a place of privilege. And I would like to think that it's an aspiration that we as humans can live towards. And the first part of that, though, is just seeing that is a viewpoint of the world, and then it's around how do we deal with all the factors that are preventing us or blocking us or holding us back to do that. So in other words, I like to think of it, if I have that belief about life, if it is that I'm in a culture that doesn't recognize or doesn't give me that sense of I can go and do it, or if I don't have a job that's allowing me the freedom of time or finances to allow me that freedom to go and actually spend money on the things that I also value, then to see that not as something wrong about me, but about as a circumstance, which is another obstacle for me to overcome to move towards what's important to me. And in that way, it's the starting point, is just getting clear on what is it that you're wanting out of your life, and what are you willing to do to take the little steps to get there, and then to see who can help you along the way to get there. Because sometimes actually it's the support from our peers, from our family, from our coaches, who can open up that insight that we couldn't see, because at that moment all we see is what's in front of us. We can only see what we can see. We can't see what we can't see. So sometimes it's really great to have other people reflect that or show that. From my personal experience, Stella, in that same space, I found that when I surround myself or interact with or read a story, I mean, one of the reasons why I decided to sail to the Antarctic was because of reading stories about these exploratory sailors, and they planted a seed in my mind of like, wow, wouldn't it be great to do something like that? Or, to go and climb Island Peak and, next to Everest was also inspired by me reading a story of someone, who wanted to go and swim in fresh water up, in the high mountains. And it's like, okay, so if that's possible for them, then maybe it's possible for me. And that's the seed that they was. I think if we could plant those seeds, then that becomes more possible for people and they can overcome those challenges.
Beautifully said. You talked about planting seeds, and it actually leads me to our last minutes of the conversation. Planting seeds. So if you could have the privilege of a conversation with yourself, not as a seed, but as Robin Booth of 10 years old, what would you tell him?
So if I could go back in time and meet myself as 10 years, what would I tell my 10-year-old self?
Or the 10 years old self who comes to you today?
Sure, hey, you can see it's a challenging question because from how I see things and how it unfolds, every part of what happens to us helps shape who we are today. And some of the challenges that we might have had, in our upbringing, my mom died when I was 7, my father died, a few years after that. I had a family, a step family experience, so do I go back and somehow console myself or tell myself something different or give myself some piece of advice which may actually change who I am today? And I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know if I want to go and change something that has or could change who I am today. So that's where I'm not quite sure what I would actually say, to be honest, what I'd actually say to them. I'd love to go and meet the person, but I don't know if I'd want to tell them, hey, I'm your older self or I'm your future self. I'd love to go and interact and have a look at and see, and like, who was this guy of 10 years old? Like, what was he dreaming? What were his beliefs? What was his challenges at the moment? And I'd love to experience that from an older self. But I actually think I would rather go and observe than to go and actually tell or say anything. That's maybe a slightly strange answer, but I think I would prefer just to go and observe and look at and trust that 10-year-old self is going to do what needs to be done to get me to where I am now.
So observation.
Well, that would just be one way of partaking in that life as opposed to trying to change it. I don't think I'd want to change the direction of where that 10-year-old young Robin was going, because I want to make sure that 10-year-old Robin lands up today, sitting here in front of you, as opposed to somewhere else. I don't know what that outcome is. I'm incredibly grateful to be where I am now, and I want to make sure I get back here. So I don't want to tell my 10-year-old self something that end up somewhere else, right?
Well, I love the way you put it. I really do.
Let me just come in, because that implies again, Stella, that there's a judgment. That question implies that there could be a better way for me to do something. So I'm going to go back in time. I'm going to speak to my 10-year-old self and hopefully set them on the good way early. But that just undermines everything that we've just been chatting about. Life unfolds. And I want to get back to where I am here. And, even with all the difficulties that there may be, all those kinds of things, I don't want it to be judged that what I've done in the past or the experiences that I've had in the past are right, or they just are. And those experiences, like I had shared, my mom died when I was 7, that had a massive impact on me. But you know what it did? It gave me an incredibly sensitive side that enabled me to work incredibly well with young children, and actually is probably the gift that I bring most to my conversations with leaders today, is a deep insight in really listening and really understanding what people are saying. And I really believe a lot of that came out of my experience of not having a mother for well over 40 something years of my life. So I don't want to change that as such. It's not a judgment I'm willing to make. So I would love to go and meet the person, but I don't want to go and tell them that, you know, some part of their future may be wrong if they do X, Y, and Z.
Wow. I'm really inspired with what you shared. And I love the way you put it and that you explained why you put it that way. It reminds me of some conversations that I have with people or leaders, even when they say, we should have done things that way. We should have done it XYZ way. And sometimes the message is also to tell them, well, maybe, you know, not maybe, you wouldn't be where you are today if it wasn't the way it has been. So I truly am grateful actually of the way you answered it with so much openness also, and sharing some of the aspects of your life that finally contribute to your whole success today. And no, it's really beautiful. I love this conversation, Robin. Before we end, and that obviously you'll tell how people can reach out to you, but before we end, is there a question that I've not asked you that you would have loved to bring forward?
There is actually, I'm not quite sure how to phrase the question, but I think it actually comes down to one of, you know, it's like, I would probably say my biggest passion is in the understanding and the creation of synergies, right? Of synergy, of the synergetic relationships. In other words, that incredible feeling of creating something with other people that is greater than the sum of just the individual parts of the people coming together. You know, the definition of synergy is the result is greater than the sum of the individual parts. And be no surprise that my school was called Synergy Schooling, and that all the skills that I look at and all the stuff that I work on with leaders from around the world around creating companies of excellence, staff experiences of excellence, or that sense of connectedness actually stem out of creating synergetics or synergetic relationships, as opposed to just hoping we find the right people. And that's where I probably spend most of my time thinking, creating, looking at, discovering, rediscovering, unpacking, unlocking, is that formula, that conversation about synergy. And I think that would be the only thing I'd want to just add, and I'm really glad you brought it up, because it's been sitting there. It's like, that is just such an incredible experience for me. It's like, what needs to be in place and how do we create that, both in families, in our marital relationships, in our companies, in our countries. And I think that is just an exciting space to work in.
Wow, amazing. I'm happy you brought it up. Thank you. It's like a little cherry on the cake. It's really, it was meant to be brought up. Thank you so much for bringing that up. And well, I can't believe it. We're already at the end, but how can people follow you or maybe work with you? How can they reach you?
So great way to reach out is to my website, which is meetrobinbooth.com. So meetrobinbooth.com. They can also find me on Facebook. And if you actually probably just Google my name, it might come up as parenting, teaching, education, schooling, property investing, you know, a whole lot of different things. But those are usually the best channels at this moment.
Oh, great, Robin. Thank you so much for these precious minutes with us. I'm so happy that you know, other people will have the opportunity to experience you. Yeah, I'm so excited. Thank you very much for being with us, Robin.
No, you're welcome. Thanks, Stella.
Thank you. Bye.